Have you ever caught yourself drifting, not into sleep, but into a life that isn't yours? A conversation that never happened, a version of you that said all the right things, a future where everything finally made sense, and for a moment, it feels real, almost too real. Then something pulls you back, a notification, a voice, reality tapping you on the shoulder like, hey, come back. But here's the strange part. You didn't want to come back, because in that imagined world, things felt clearer, safer, sometimes even better. Now, if you've ever done this, replayed moments, rewritten outcomes, or built entire scenarios in your head, you might have asked yourself a quiet question. Why do I do this so much? And the answer isn't as simple as you're distracted or you're overthinking. In fact, what if I told you this habit might actually be your mind trying to solve something it doesn't fully understand yet? Let's slow down for a second, because what you're experiencing has a name in psychology. It's closely tied to something called mental simulation, your brain's ability to imagine possibilities before they happen. Athletes use it to rehearse success, writers use it to create worlds, even your brain uses it to prepare you for conversations, risks, and unknown outcomes. So, no, you're not strange for doing this. But here's where it gets interesting, because not all imagined scenarios are the same. Some feel light, harmless, almost playful, but others, they feel intense, repetitive, emotional, like your brain keeps going back to the same unfinished story again and again. And that's not random. That's your mind opening what psychologists call a loop. An unresolved experience, a question without closure, a version of reality that never fully happened, but still lives inside you. And your brain hates unfinished things. There's actually a psychological principle behind this. Your mind is wired to seek completion. When something feels incomplete, it stays active in your thoughts longer. That's why you replay that one conversation from months ago. That's why you imagine what you should have said. That's why you create alternate endings where things finally go your way. It's not just imagination, it's your brain trying to finish the story. But here's the part nobody really talks about. Sometimes, the story isn't meant to be finished in reality, so your mind finishes it in imagination instead. And that can feel comforting at first. You get control, you get clarity, you get to be the version of yourself that made sense. But over time, that same habit can quietly turn into something else. Because the more your brain starts preferring imagined clarity over real-life uncertainty, the harder reality begins to feel. And this is where people start slipping into a pattern they don't even notice. They stop just imagining scenarios and start living inside them. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally. You're sitting in a room, but your mind is somewhere else, in a future conversation, in a perfect version of your life, in a moment where everything finally clicks. And here's the dangerous illusion. It feels like progress, but nothing in your real world is actually moving. Now, don't misunderstand this. Your imagination is not the enemy. In fact, it's one of the most powerful tools your brain has. It helps you dream, plan, create, and even heal. But like anything powerful, it depends on how it's being used, because there's a very thin line between imagining your life and avoiding it. And most people don't even realize when they've crossed it. But there's one subtle sign that changes everything. And once you notice it, you won't be able to unsee it. It's the moment when your imagined scenarios stop being about curiosity and start becoming about escape. And in part 2, we're going to go deeper into that, because what seems like harmless daydreaming on the surface might actually reveal something much deeper about how you process emotions, uncertainty, and even your sense of self. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because once imagination turns into escape, it starts revealing things you've been quietly avoiding. Not in an obvious way, not in a dramatic, life-changing realization, but in small, subtle patterns. You start choosing imagined conversations over real ones. You rehearse confidence in your head, but hesitate in reality. You feel deeply understood in your thoughts, but slightly disconnected around people. And the strange part is, you might still function normally. You go about your day, you talk, work, respond, exist, but there's always a part of you somewhere else, living in a version of life that feels more aligned with who you think you are. Now here's the deeper psychological layer. Your brain isn't trying to trap you, it's trying to protect you. Because imagined scenarios give you something reality doesn't always offer: control. In your mind, you can pause moments, rewind mistakes, say the perfect thing at the perfect time. There's no risk of embarrassment, no unpredictability, no emotional exposure you're not ready for. And for a brain that's experienced confusion, rejection, or uncertainty, that control feels safe, almost addictive. But here's the paradox: the more control you experience in your imagination, the less comfortable you become with the unpredictability of real life. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to avoid moments that can't be controlled. Difficult conversations, spontaneous decisions, situations where you don't know the outcome, because your mind whispers something subtle. Why risk discomfort when you can feel better instantly in your head? And that's where the shift happens. Not suddenly, but gradually. You stop using imagination as a tool and start depending on it as a refuge. Now let's pause here for a second, because this doesn't mean something is wrong with you. In fact, people who imagine detailed scenarios often have something in common. They are deeply reflective. They think in layers. They notice emotions others ignore. They try to understand not just what happens, but why it happens. And that level of awareness is powerful. But it also comes with a cost, because when your mind is capable of creating entire emotional experiences internally, reality can sometimes feel underwhelming, slower, messier, less meaningful, and that's where many people get stuck, not because they're weak, but because their inner world is simply more compelling than their outer one. Now, here's a question that might stay with you longer than this video. What if the scenarios you keep imagining aren't random at all? What if they're showing you something, not about the world, but about yourself? Think about it. The conversations you replay, the outcomes you rewrite, the futures you keep returning to, they all have patterns. Maybe you imagine finally being understood. Maybe you imagine proving something to someone. Maybe you imagine a version of yourself that feels complete. Those aren't just fantasies. They're signals. Signals of what you value, what you're missing, what you haven't fully expressed yet. And once you start seeing it that way, everything changes. Because now, instead of getting lost in these scenarios, you can start learning from them. Instead of asking, why do I keep imagining this? You start asking, what is this trying to show me? And that question is powerful because it gently brings you back, not by force, but by awareness. You don't need to eliminate imagination. You just need to reconnect it with reality. Take what you see in your mind and slowly bring pieces of it into your real life. Not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly, because the goal isn't to stop imagining a better version of yourself. The goal is to slowly become someone who doesn't need to escape into it. And maybe, just maybe, those worlds you keep creating in your head aren't there to replace reality. They're there to guide you back to it in a way that finally makes sense.